Welcome to the Life with Joey Calvo Podcast. I'm Joey Calvo. Before we get started with our guest today, please continue to help support the victims of the California wildfires. They still do need support in reference to gift cards and anything else possible so they can rebuild their lives and move on. God spared them a lot of things, especially their lives. So we need to be there to support them. Second, about a week ago, I had a little surgery on my right eyelid. There was a lesion on my right eyelid. And so I got my results today. It is normal. It was benign. God blessed me for that. I'm very thankful for that. I forgot what they said it was, but it was benign, but it was like a a lot of doctors have been telling me that I've been dehydrated recently. So that might be part of that as well. All right. So today our guest is John J.R. Rennie. He built up a nearly 40-year-old business software company. When he thought he was going to hit the road at the end, God said, we have something better for you. And he started something very special that we're going to have him discuss. So, John, JR, thank you for coming on the podcast, first of all.
Joey, thanks for having me, and look forward to our chat, and hopefully your audience will get something valuable out of our discussion today.
Okay. So explain how we got to where we're at right now.
Well, God has a will of making his point in a person's life. And sometimes if we aren't too thick-headed, we will actually listen. And at the end of 2015, my software company went through a situation where I knew that I had to eventually wind it down. Mm-hmm. I was going to do that about 10 years later, but God accelerated that process. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of 2016, I had to cut all expenses for our company so that my clients could still get supported and so that my employees would be able to get a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I recognized that I wasn't able to save the company again. I had already done that 3 times, and this was not going to happen this time. So my first decision was, well, I need to go out and replace this income since I'm not taking a paycheck from my company. And every door I went through got slammed in my face. There wasn't any opportunities, which is really unusual because God's always provided. Mm-hmm. And in May of 2016, I was frustrated, angry, and I said out loud, all right, God, I know you're behind this. What do you want? Mm-hmm. And that's when I began to realize that he had something else for me. Towards the end of that year, an acquaintance reached out to me about psychometric assessments, and I immediately said, no, not interested. But when I left that meeting, I got this prompting from God that said, do it. I go, this makes no sense. First of all, it's not cheap. I haven't had a paycheck in 9 to 10 months. How am I supposed to, what am I supposed to do with this? It made no sense to me. And he said, do it anyway. So I called up the guy, renegotiated the price for my wife and I to learn how to interpret psychometric assessments. And that was the first step into starting the ministry.
Before we go on, can you explain what that is?
Psychometric assessments?
Yes.
Yep. All right. So we all understand DNA of our bodies, that God knows what gender you are, what your height is, color of your eyes, all that stuff. Well, there's also a DNA of your soul and a DNA of your spirit. The DNA of your soul are the gifts and talents and abilities that God's giving you. The things that make you want to get up in the morning and say, I'm going to do something today. The areas that you're really focused in on, are you interested? Are you interested in helping people grow? Are you interested in teaching or leading or just helping people? And then what tools, what abilities has he given you? That's the DNA of your soul. That's what psychometry measures. It measures these things that are in you, that have been in you since you uh, were created and will be with you for your entire lifetime. The DNA of your soul is what it is that you're supposed to do with those gifts and talents. So psychometry measures that. Now, there are a lot of assessments out there that people have heard of, like DISC or Myers-Briggs or Gallup Strengths. These are all psychometric assessments, and they get that classification when a third party will measure the assessment viability. Does it actually measure what you say it's going to measure? Like in ours, temperaments, how a person thinks, or an impact style. How were they designed to make a difference in this world? And then the other thing is, are they reliable? If they measured it this way today, in a year from now, in 2 years from now, will you get the same results? And so for a assessment offering to be able to get that accreditation, a third party has to go through that testing and say, yeah, this actually measures what it says it's measuring, and it's reliable over multiple months and years. We've had people who have taken our assessments without knowing it 5-6 years prior, came back, took the assessments again, and then didn't realize until later that, wow, they got the same results.
Okay. Okay, so this assessment is probably a DNA of your soul.
Sure.
I'm actually going to have you test me in something like this. I'd like to know what the actual DNA of my soul is right now.
Sure.
So
I don't have the testament. Yeah, I don't have the testament questions up front, but I could ask you some basic questions.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Just to get an idea of, because I do feel that God has things for me. Right now, I'm unemployed, so I was in the same boat. I'm in the same boat now that you were back then. I mean, I am getting unemployment, and I'm living day by day. And then, I mean, God did bring some people into my life in reference to support. So, sometimes I kind of, I'm not saying I'm questioning him on that, but sometimes, I feel like I misread or misunderstood the signal he gave me.
Oh, okay, that's fair enough.
So, yeah. But in reference to this, in reference to the DNA of my soul, I really need to get an idea of, because I'm learning things now that I've done years before, and they're just coming up, and I'm finding out more about it now, and it's put me into where I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression in 2009, and it's now coming back and biting me and wanting to put me in isolation. So so that's why I'm asking about this, to see where I really stand within my life. And
well, so we actually have 11 different assessments, and each one of them measures different things. But I can give a go at this. I don't have the assessments in front of me.
Yeah.
But I can get an idea. So when you invite people to an event, are there certain people that instinctively aren't going to RSVP, aren't going to get back to you? And does that kind of annoy you at times? Or are you more gracious and, it's like you understand that they're busy?
I understand that they're busy because I feel that now too, in reference to anything I do anyway.
Okay. So, in making a decision, gathering information, or evaluating the information, are you more concerned about how this impacts people, or are you more concerned about getting the job done?
More concerned about getting the well. Actually, I'm more concerned about what people think. I I I feel like I attempt to be a people pleaser,
Okay.
not a self pleaser.
All right. When you are looking at information that you have, will you do a lot of analysis to be able to get all the facts and figures and history of something? Or is there an aspect where you will kind of listen to your gut?
I have an aspect where I listen to my gut, and it's like what I do with this podcast. I keep it in a conversation form, and I go from there in reference to when when to question, what to question, etc.
Okay. So based upon the temperaments, and this is a really crude, and I don't normally do this, but I've been doing this for a while now. So based upon this temperament, I would say that you are a futurist, feeler, and maybe somewhere in between a planner and an adapter. So when you go to gather information, you will listen to inspiration and intuition. You will have faith in that as much as if you had done the analysis on Google to be able to do all the research. Feeler tends to mean that you are going to react with people in an empathetic and sympathetic manner, where you care about how this impacts them, even if it's contrary to accomplishing an objective. And those people that don't seem to have compassion or empathy, you have little patience for, and can actually, maybe if provoked enough, speak up and say something that would really, in your mind, put them in their place. And then finally, on the planner adapter, you are fairly organized because you were getting ready for this meeting last night when you sent out those emails and so forth. So there's an aspect that you are organized and structured, but you aren't so laissez-faire about the situation, that you are not going to plan, but you're not so restricted by plans that you can't kind of pivot if necessary. So my guess is that on the on the planner adapter, you're at 50-50, 60-40 range. On the feeler, you're at least 70%. And on the futurist, probably 80, maybe a little bit more on that scale.
Okay.
Now, I would have no way of confirming that without you actually taking the assessment. So maybe one of your people would like to fund the assessments program for you to take. And that way you can take those assessments. We can come back and see if I was even close.
Okay. Well, I do have a GoFundMe campaign right now to upgrade and expand this podcast. So, we can always, they can always, like, as they're watching and listening to this live stream, or watch it on the video afterwards, they can always reach out to you and say, hey, how can I do that? So all right. Sure. So let's go back to
good.
Yeah. So we're going to go back now to you in reference to this happening that we just did, and not having a paycheck for 9-10 months, and continue your story from there.
All right. So once I got into the training to understand and interpret psychometric assessments, that kind of started opening up a series of doors. Those assessments were always used in the corporate world with large international organizations through private consulting. So companies like Clorox or Coca-Cola or IBM or Lucent Technologies and so forth had used these assessments and the consulting behind it to help their executives, their top people, perform to the best of their ability.
Mhm.
So that was the focus of it. And about 5 months into it or 4 months into it, I got this epiphany where God goes, I want this in the church. I want to use this in the church.
Mhm.
I thought, all right, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Why are you talking to me about this type of thing?
Yeah.
Uh, and a byproduct of going through our program is to create what's called a purpose statement. So those
Mm.
assessment results that I just reviewed, in addition to those three, there's also interests, abilities, and values, um, spiritual gifts from the Father, spiritual gifts
Mm.
from Jesus. These are
Mhm.
all different things that we measure through these assessments.
Mhm.
And we produce a purpose statement as a byproduct of culmination of a person going through an entire workshop program. And my
Mhm.
purpose statement reads like this: I must strategically lead a gifted team to embrace the power of their God-given design for long-term positive results.
Mhm.
The leadership part I got. I've been in leadership since my teens.
Mhm.
Even when I don't want to be a leader, I get promoted or I get asked to, or I get put into a position where, all right, I guess I have to step up and take charge here.
Mhm.
That's always been the case. And it was like, all right, I know that about myself. The middle part was the interesting part, getting people to embrace the power of their God-given design. Well, God had just led me through the metric assessment. So now I understood design. Now understood the DNA of their soul. That I
Mhm.
got. So now it was a matter of, all right, you got that, but how are you going to get the church? Because he told me he wanted this in the church. How was I going to get that
Mhm.
into the church?
Mhm.
And then it occurred to me, I guess I have to write the curriculum that will
Mhm.
introduce uh, the DNA of the soul,
Mhm.
psychometry to the church,
Mhm.
and create a training program to do that.
Mhm.
And that's what I did. I said, all right, Lord, I guess that's what I will do. Now, here's a really interesting, Joey. There's two things that were really shocking when this happened. As soon
Mhm.
as I said yes to God in that moment of contemplation,
Yeah.
the name of the ministry was just popped in my head, Brushfires Ministry. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, my
when I
first,
read about
my,
that, I was thinking about Moses in reference to, you know, when he, um, you know,
the burning
left
bush.
the burning bush. Yeah, and I was like, oh wow, So go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off of
No,
that.
it's fine. So I thought my first reaction was cool name. I'm not quite sure, the symbology of the burning bush came to me too, but I was like, I wasn't quite sure what it all meant until, a year later where I realized that what we were doing is by showing a person their God-given purpose, the DNA of
Mm-hmm.
their soul, we're lighting a fire in them.
Mm-hmm.
And by them pursuing their purpose, their calling, they will light fires in other people, hence brush fires. By a
Okay.
person pursuing what God created them to do, it
Mm-hmm.
starts a fire in other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I did that. And I thought, all right, I got to write the curriculum. Never wrote a book before,
Right.
never did anything like this before.
Mm-hmm.
But curiously, for the prior 20 years, when I wrote an article or I wrote a poem or a short story or I read a devotion that was really like, man, this is important, I'm going to hold on to it for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
took a photocopy of it and I stuck it in a folder in my office.
Mm-hmm.
So I went downstairs to grab that folder to say, all right, there might be something in there.
Mm-hmm.
And chapter by chapter of the curriculum was sitting there in that folder. I
Wow.
pulled the paper out and I go, that's all about identity. Pull another paper out. Oh, that's all about purpose.
Right.
That's about service. That's each chapter of the book was already written for me in these articles, the thoughts and the ideas that had prompted me to store that in that folder.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent the next 6 months writing the curriculum, and in February 2018, I did our first live workshop at our church, and that was the beginning of the ministry.
Wow. Okay. So everything that built up, including what we did just earlier, everything built up together. It led you into starting a ministry called Brushfires Ministry, and so now that Brushfire Ministries, how far has it expanded since you started?
So we were just doing it in the Pacific Northwest in local churches, but in 2021, a business friend wanted to make a donation to our ministry, and we weren't a 501c3, so he had his lawyer do it for free for us as pro bono.
Wow.
And so we became a 501c3 ministry in 2021. In 2022, one of our graduates said, hey, we need to do this on video. And so I was mentioning that, and another business friend of mine came up and wrote a check for 75% of the cost of producing a video series. So in 23, we started to put together a team to actually produce this video series. And that was all completed by the end of 23. And we released the online video series in 2024. So beginning of last year, effectively. And what we've been doing is now ministering to people all over North America, because they will hear it through a podcast. They will hear it from one of our graduates. They'll reach out to us through social media. And we're now ministering throughout all of North America.
Okay. That's great. So last night I sent him a question that came from, and I'm going to introduce our number one fan, number one supporter. And when I mentioned about God opening up this door, this is the door I'm talking about. Her name is American Fox. She has become a very huge supporter of this podcast. She has become she became the number one fan, number one supporter. And when I don't have questions, she sends me some. So today, the question that I sent him last night was this, and this is from American Fox directly. Her question was, if God didn't lead him to where he's at right now, what would he have done in retirement?
And that's a great question. I've never been asked that question. So thank you, America Fox, for that. It took me a little bit of soul searching. So one of the things about life is we don't know what we don't know. So if you are single and you've never had kids and you get married, you don't know what getting married is like until you're married. If you are married and you've never had kids and then you have kids, you didn't know what it was like to have kids until you actually have kids. So we don't know what we don't know. And so if you had asked me that question back then in 2015 and 16, I probably would have said travel and seen the rest of the world with my wife. That would have been the plan. The funds would have been there because of the business and so forth. In retrospect, God's plan was much better. I may still travel because of our ministry with my wife, but his plan for my life actually brought joy and fulfillment, love and peace, patience, self-control. I've been able to experience the fruit of the Spirit as described in Galatians 5:22 and 23, just so that people don't have to look it up. the Spirit of God, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
Mm-hmm.
These are all needs of our soul. We don't know
Mm-hmm.
what it's like to have those until we have them. Just
Yeah.
like you don't know what it's like to be a parent until you have kids, you
Right.
don't know what it's like to experience joy until God actually brings that into your life by being obedient to his call.
Mm-hmm.
So, short answer, would have traveled the world with my wife and seen things and experienced life that way with her after all the sacrifices of starting the software company. In
Right.
hindsight now, and knowing what I know about living out your God-given purpose, I would say what God had for me was so much better. I've been
Mm-hmm.
able to touch lives throughout North America, change
Mm-hmm.
them. I've been able to be part of restoring marriages. I've been able to heal widows who have lost their husband and have lost their identity.
Mm-hmm.
I've been involved in things that are so intimate to people's souls that they weep
Mm-hmm.
as a byproduct of it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that God interrupted my plans. It
Mm.
took me a year or two to get there for him to convince me, but what he has for us is so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm learning that now, um, because up until last month, I didn't have a podcast until like the end of May. And I was just getting ready to give up, let people go, like I was saying, being isolated. And you know, God had opened up this door with American Fox almost going on 2 years ago.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, and with American Fox, who's American Fox 24/7, you know, she, if you look at her, she looks like Wonder Woman, of course, but different, um, different, different reflections of her of between Wonder Woman and American Fox. Um, in reference to superpowers and so on. But during that time, and even up to now, I have gotten to the point where I'm like, why is this door still open? Why did it close on me? Well, because I was, feeling that the what was going on, I thought was going to be something that would have led to even better, better not temptations, a better life, quote unquote. And when I said earlier about could I have been misunderstood, that's what I kept feeling. And
Sure.
and American Fox was like, no, you're gonna have podcasts. I believe in you, etc. I'm gonna stand by you. And I didn't think that it was gonna be more than that. And what happened in reference to that, um, by the end of last month, I was in the podcast.com newsletter that JR saw and lots of people saw. And I had a list. So when JR came to me about when I went to email everybody about, dates available, when JR finally got back to me, all those dates were taken real quick to the point where I had to open up Wednesdays and Fridays just to just to fit everybody in and you know make let them share their story. So every time that a guest like JR decided to book, I sent it to American Fox. And I said, this is because of you. This isn't because of me. And, and maybe I'm taking it as, this that God's message for me was to keep this podcast going and entertain. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, God, Lord, I understand you want me to do this, but what is American Fox going to be part? What part of this is American Fox in this? Is this going to be a relationship that leads to something better that I didn't have in previous romance, in previous romantic relationships, including my own ex-wife, or is it going to be something else? And that's where the misunderstood came in, was the relationship part. And the one thing I will say, when I asked you to do that little assessment and asking, for me to find out who I really am, was because of I'm a person who really is more like, I want to leave everybody alone. When you said, when you asked me the question about more of people being a people pleaser or just focusing on the work. I mean, I should have said focusing on the work, but I wanted to be a people pleaser because anytime I wanted to do something with, when I went to go do something, I didn't want to be alone. I really didn't want to be alone, because when I'm feeling like I'm alone, I get depressed. I'm like, you know what? Everybody's got their own lives. I'm going to leave them be. I'm just going to walk out the door. And at one time, I was coming back from a doctor's appointment. I was having a really upsetting day. I came back from the doctor, and I get a phone call from the suicide hotline. Someone called thinking I was going to end my life. And I'm like, oh my God, no. I said, I have no reason to end my life at all. I may have had a bad day, or I may want to leave everybody alone, but it doesn't mean I want to end my life. I just want to, let everybody enjoy what they were doing and just not feel like an inconvenience. So now
Joey, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
I you might be overthinking this a little. Look at it from this way. Look at it from this perspective.
Yeah.
What American Fox did was she demonstrated kindness and generosity towards you, and which has enabled you to get out of your shell, to be a light for other people who are in their shell, to maybe come out of their shell and to try something new.
Uh-huh.
So her kindness and generosity has enabled you to be a voice for everybody else who is lost or trapped or feels isolated, to maybe inspire them that there's more than what they can do, that what God has created them to do, the DNA of their soul is still waiting for them. So I would simply look at it from that perspective as a blessing, that you are now given an opportunity. In fact, I would encourage your listeners, if at any time during this podcast or during the course of his other podcasts that he has inspired you, shoot him out a kind word, give him a like, share the video, subscribe to the podcast, do those sort of things that would show Joey that he's making a difference, even if it's just one life. There's a thing that in the Bible where Jesus says that he'll leave the 99 to go seek out the one.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, dude. So America Fox sought out one of God's lost children, and with kindness and generosity helped you to be inspired to do something that you maybe not wouldn't have done without that inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And so here you are, and you could be returning that favor by inspiring and helping others. So I would just let that. And then if you have those confirmations, take that to God and say, hey, Dad, thanks for letting me be part of inspiring Mark or
Mm-hmm.
Mary. Thank you for getting me out of my box.
Okay. Believe it or not, you know how you said that's been the entire thing I've been saying all along. And you know how you said it, even if I inspired one life, meet the one life right there. Because I hear that from her a lot.
Nice.
And
I,
and like I said, when I was at the point where I was gonna, where right, even today, even after last night, when I did believe me, the question I sent to him last night would have freaked everybody out. Okay, I mean, literally freaked everybody out, even myself out of it, because it wasn't the type of question that was supposed to go with this. Um, so I felt like I embarrassed everybody when I did that last night, and I was like, okay, and like you were saying earlier, it's more a reaction than a response. And so what you just gave me right now is the response to the feelings that I should be having, that I should be, and I'm truly thankful for all those people that responded by wanting to come on the podcast. And I mean, like JR, because believe it or not, we have podcasts through the Yazoo, quote unquote, until like March of 2026. That's how many
wow.
people.
Good on you, Joey.
That is how many people. And I'm like, but I wasn't, I'm not saying I wasn't grateful. I'm not saying I wasn't, like proud, but I was still like, this was just something that, like I said, that American Fox, like you said, the kindness and the generosity. But what I was picking up more with, in reference to it, was the love.
Yeah, so there's a thing there's a thing about the word love.
Yeah.
And in our society, it's been intentionally confused. We say that we love cheeseburgers and pizza.
Mm-hmm.
We say that we love God, and we say we love our spouses and our children.
Yeah.
It's not all the same love. Okay.
Right.
The
Yeah.
word love, the word love that is used in Galatians 5:22, love, joy,
Mm-hmm.
peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. That love that's in that is talking about an unconditional love.
Yes.
I love you for who I created you to be, Joey.
Mm-hmm.
Not for what you look like, not what you can do for me, not for what you give me. I love you for who God created you to be. It's an
Right.
unconditional love that God extends to his children.
Right.
To be seen and known and loved is like being loved by God. That's a paraphrase quote from Tim Keller.
Right.
We have the ability to love one another from that perspective. And people that support you and encourage you and subscribe and do all that on your page, it's a form of expressing love to inspire you, to encourage you, to exhort you to continue to do what you're doing. The
Mm-hmm.
people that are appearing on your podcast, it's an opportunity for you to get to know them and for them to get to know you, and then to be able to applaud the kindness and goodness of people like America Fox and so forth. So
Mhm.
understand that it's love that we're looking for, but it's not the love that the world has defined it to be.
Yeah.
It's being loved for who God created us to be. And
Mhm.
that could be with a brother and a sister and an aunt and everybody across the board, because we can all love them for who God created them to be. Their behavior might be messed up, and some of the
Yeah.
things they do and say could be really messed up, but who God created them to be is beautiful,
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful.
And it's like I realized that, um, because like I said, I was ready to shut the door on everything, um, in reference to it, and American Fox was the first one I was going to shut the door on, um, but I just felt that she wasn't going to give up, and when I realized that, like I said, when you mentioned about the one person that you know I could change lives with, like I said, it's right there. She literally said, "Listen, you changed my life, and you got me to see something." But at the same time, as I got to know her, I started to see things in a different way with her, through her, and that's why I I was that love relationship love was kept coming into my mind, because if the two were together in person, I couldn't say it would be like world domination, but it would be a, a great partnership, and
Yeah.
something to really build with, because we both believe in God, and we both know that God brought us together for something like this. You
Well,
know.
like I said, she's a superhero of kindness and
Mhm.
generosity. But those are all gifts of the Spirit. So, as you said, if she's also a Christian, then she has that same Holy Spirit in her, and she sees you as a brother in Christ that she felt led to by the Spirit to
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
be kind and gracious to you.
Yes.
And in doing so, she gets to experience the love and the joy of the Lord, who says, "Well done, daughter. You made Joey's life a little bit more um, palatable. You made him a little bit more encouraged, and now Joey can go out inspired and 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 speak out on behalf of people like himself,
Mhm.
and encourage other people that are struggling with that same sort of malady." If you want to know what your purpose is,
Mhm.
one of the one of the easiest ways of doing it, obviously our program is that's part of what we do, but one
Mhm.
of the easiest ways of figuring it out is look at what it is that God has done in your life,
Mhm.
that he's delivered you from. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's isolationism, maybe it's a poor self-image, whatever he's delivered you from, and then turn around and look for the person behind you who quite likely has that exact same problem, and you can go to them, Joey, and say,
Mhm.
"Hey, I understand where you're at because
Mhm.
I was there, but let me tell you about my God and
Mhm.
how he led me out of that."
Mhm.
One
Yeah.
of the things that's compelled me to start the ministry was the lack of joy. I had success. I had financial well-being. I had a beautiful wife and a nice home and all that stuff. I didn't have joy. But when I started to serve God as I was created to, and he allowed me to be part of him changing other people's lives,
Mhm.
I got paid in joy. And now I have the privilege of helping other people learn how to experience joy in their lives, because that's what God led me through.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is that you've struggled with, Joey, and God has delivered you from it, he wants you to turn around and help your brother or sister
Mm-hmm.
who is struggling in that same way and
Mm-hmm.
help them uh, get out of their pit and to
Yeah.
be able to get closer to God.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I was thinking about with in reference to American Fox when I was talking about that love relationship. It's like when we converse, it's like I can feel the joy in it. I feel like there's joy in it. Like I said, in that partnership, in the bond,
Good.
and I maybe that's something I've been really wanting. It even though it might be a physical temptation joy, but just it's like maybe like what I'm saying about that wanting to be, you know, not lonely is more of the joy I want,
Sure.
but I'm also feeling it with American Fox because like I'm saying, like when we converse, when she stood by me and believed and still continues to believe in me no matter how I am right now. And like you were saying with the being the superheroine of you know kindness and and so on, that could be the joy that's starting it. And like I'm really hoping for more. And I even said this in prior podcasts. I did a whole podcast of how I say words really affect your feelings. And anytime someone has posted something negative, I took it to heart. I didn't say, oh, that's nothing, And I mean, it got to the point where if someone said something negative, I actually reported them to like Facebook or YouTube,
That's fair.
because it was damaging. I mean, this person on Facebook, and this is what really got me to say, you know what, and I apologize, Lord, for cursing on these podcasts. I don't edit these podcasts. I don't. So someone turned around and said, "Oh, you got a low production value, and this, and this is a podcast Facebook page where other podcasters are reading what's being said on these comments." And to hear that, it was like I was embarrassing all the other podcasters.
So you're not. And for that person to say that, they either have two motives. They're trying to guilt you into buying their services, which is manipulative and evil, or they are just simply bitter, ugly people that have nothing better to do than to hurt somebody else.
Or somebody who thinks they're too good.
That's
how I looked at it. That's how I looked at it. So I turned around and I reported it, and I actually left that Facebook group in shame because it was really damaging. And it really took it to the point where I was like, fuck this podcast. I'm done. I'm giving up because this was I felt like I was really doing this for nothing. Like like you said, I wasn't reaching out. And again, American Fox was like, yeah, you've reached out to people. You reached out to me. You keep reminding me, how much of a difference you're making. And, that I believe in you and that, more podcasts were going to happen. And like I said, when that newsletter came out and just, and the reason why I'm saying I'm booked till March of 2026 is all because of one person who's a publicist. Actually, yeah, one person who's a publicist for 100 guests. And I mean, it just blew it out of the water. And I like I said, I wasn't, of course, like I'm saying, I'm grateful, but I wasn't thanking me. I was showing no appreciation of myself for that. I was thanking American Fox for it because of, like you've been saying all along. Because if I can satisfy one person, then, I may have done my job.
So can I encourage you? So can I encourage you to thank God instead?
I actually did that too. I actually did thank him afterwards. I did
it's
thank
appropriate.
him
It's appropriate to thank America Fox for what she did, but she did what she did because she's a daughter of the Most High God, and she was being obedient to what God told her to do. So simply thank God for being used by Him. Look for the people that you can have a positive impact on, that have a similar story that you do, that you can encourage, and then ask God for wisdom and how can you possibly help them, because somebody helped you to get to where you are right now. The other thing I would tell you is that when people are being intentionally evil or hurtful, there's something in them that you are provoking without you understanding it. As a believer of God, you have the Holy Spirit in you. So every person that doesn't have the Spirit of God in them, quite likely has the spirit of evil in them. And so when you say or do something that might encourage and help other people, it irritates them because of the evil that's in them. What they're trying to do is to get you to self-silence, for you to not speak out, for you not to inspire somebody that has a similar challenge that you do. It's coming from a position of fear and anxiety in their life, because the demon, this Holy Spirit that's inside you, is agitating the demons that are inside them. It only has power over you, Joey, if you allow it.
Right.
If you read that negative comment, and instead of embracing it and accepting it and believing in it, you say, whoever wrote that is really a hurt, damaged individual. God, would you please heal them? Would you send somebody to them to make their life more pleasant and more uplifting? Would you work on their behalf so that they won't hurt so much that they have to turn around and try to hurt me?
Yeah. And that, that's one thing with American Fox. I always mention to her, and of course, in the Bible that not only that, and I also watch Joel Osteen and Dr. Charles Stanley, and this winds up being ironic. Anytime I'm in one of these quote unquote mood swings where I'm like wanting to get away and everything, I would turn to Dr. Charles Stanley or Joel Osteen, and there's a message right there, right as I'm in that mood.
Yeah, I would encourage you to lean in hard to Charles Stanley.
Yeah.
He's a good, godly man.
Yeah.
I use the term faith lift. If you need your faith lifted up, Charles Stanley is a good representative of God's love and joy.
Right. And the other thing is, of course, there's, I always, and like I said, I always tell American Fox that she will always have God's spiritual eyes. So if anybody is curious of what God's spiritual eyes are, and this actually started with Joel Osteen in reference to this. We have our regular eyes to see. But what we really don't know is behind those eyes, in a way, and in our soul, and in our hearts, there's another set of eyes that are really there. And those eyes, quote unquote, are not physical eyes. They're actually more supernatural. And it's what it is a protection barrier. And that protection barrier is all these warriors, all these soldiers with God standing behind them, protecting you from getting physically hurt or emotionally hurt or any type of damage. These spiritual eyes are there for you. Do you remember that?
God loves his children and will watch out for his children, especially those children that are obediently doing what he's created them to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to face the consequences of our bad choices. And, if you are doing 60 in a 35 miles per hour zone and you get pulled over, that's a consequence of a really bad choice on your behalf. And sometimes God's going to let you to experience that consequence so that you don't, hurt somebody in the future. Yeah. So our relationship with God does not protect us from the consequences of our bad choices.
Right.
Because as any loving father, if I see one of my children doing something that is going to be hurtful to them or hurtful to the people around them, as a father, it's my job to correct them, just like it is with our Heavenly Father. So we just want to be real careful about feeling bulletproof, because as long as we're doing what God's created us to do, it's going to work out for good. But if we are doing things based upon our own agenda and intentions, the consequences are on you.
Okay. All right. So we're coming up to an hour. So JR, how can people reach out to you and look into, Brushfires Ministry?
The best way is to go to the website that's there, brushfires-digital.com. If you register as a guest, it's free. There's no credit card information. But when you register as a user, you'll be gifted 3 books. One of them, which is my latest book, Sparks Turn into Brushfires. You'll get one of our 11 assessments free. And then if you decide that you want to actually go through our workshop program, I would recommend either the gold or the platinum monthly subscription. It's the least expensive way of getting the videos, the book, the 11 assessments, and eventually getting your purpose statement and discipling time to help you walk out your purpose. So we really want to strengthen God's kingdom by strengthening and leading more of his children to do the work that they were created to do. And I think that will make a difference in this world.
Okay. And JR, thank you so much for doing that assessment on me and letting me see that, there is that the love, quote unquote, that I'm seeing is there. I'm just not looking at it. I wasn't looking at it the right way. And in reference to this podcast and continuing this podcast, and in closing, I'm going to say that when I was getting help for the anxiety and depression, a psychiatrist actually told me this was my therapy. And as I wasn't believing it. But now, even through God, he was even right. This is therapy to me. Like you're saying, I'm doing this to open up doors for people that are wanting to be shut in and put to this and feel like they're not worthy. And who knows, maybe there's a little bit of American Fox that's not worthy, that she came to me and wanted to open up, and I've opened it up for her, and she's opened up things for me. And that's, why that's, like I said, I'm hoping there's more to it, and that bond is getting, that bond gets stronger and could lead to something that could be physical, because I in my feelings is God brought us together in the physical sense to work together to bring his works out. Me through the podcast, and American Fox through other ways, and that, that's the feeling I have. Like I said, even though with a physical, quote unquote, romantic in it, but in with that, it's much more than just the physical romance that I kind of seek, and I kind of noticed,
Well, Joey, we'll see how that works out. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience.
Yes.
And I hope what we shared is uplifting for other people out there, and that you continue to inspire people.
Thank you so much, JR, for being on the podcast, and thank you for uplifting me a little bit, because now now I can look at this another way, and it's not as damaging as it was last night, personally. But again, I thank you for that, because this did uplift me a little bit. Well, no, I'm wrong. Not a little bit. Enough to really see that there is more to come, and that God does have something with American Fox in it. And I just have to see, what continues to keep the door open to it. Because, like I said, if American Fox didn't come in through that door, I probably wouldn't be here, So there's got to be more with that door that God has, that I just have to look at, and just have to find out what that door really is going to bring. And I should look at this podcast as a ministry as a way too. Because like you said, if I could uplift one person to do better for their lives, then God's having me do my job. And maybe that's what God, and that, like you said, maybe that's what God's got me focused. And, like I'm feeling that, American Fox is part of that ministry, quote unquote. And the bond, like I said, I feel like that's the bond I'm talking about. That's the bond maybe that I've been looking for, the true bond to really move with. And American Fox provided, like you said earlier, in reference to the generosity and the kindness and what I feel is love of some kind right now. It may not be the physical love, but love of some kind. And that's how I looked at it.
I think stick on that track, and I think you'll do good, Joey.
All right. Yep. Thank you so much again, JR, for being a part of the podcast. Thank you, everyone, for watching the Life with Joey Calvo podcast. God bless you all. And, really check out JR's website, brushfires-digital.com. All right. God bless you all.